When working with financial data in Excel, it sometimes is critical to calculate information based on quarter or fiscal year. And if the quarters and fiscal years that you're using are standard and they match up with the chronological years, this can often be relatively straightforward. In column D, however, there is a formula here that's a little bit longer than you might have hoped, and this is how we can calculate a quarter. And there probably are some other ways to do this too, but I haven't run across any that are a whole lot simpler. But this, as you can see, does calculate the quarter. In effect, it takes the month, it pulls that out of the entry in column C, so this example is actually a 3. We divide these by 3 and then round to the nearest whole number. And for the fiscal year, all we need to do here is pull out or extract the year from the entry in column C. So that's pretty simple and straightforward. In many organizations, in many companies, the fiscal year does not coincide with the chronological year. And the federal government, for example, starts the fiscal year October 1st. How are we going to calculate quarters? Actually, what we're going to be doing here to calculate quarters in that kind of a system is, even though this formula we're about to see is going to be somewhat long, it's going to be easy to read and to understand, and you might even want to consider using it here again if we revisit this to put in standard quarters. I'm going to make the column wider so we can see this more clearly. It will take advantage of the fact that the month function does extract the month from a given cell. So here's the function we want to use. It's called equal choose. The choose function says, let's take a calculation somewhere. How about this month coming out of our date, comma. What we are now going to provide are 12 answers, because the only possible answers we can get out of this are the numbers 1 through 12. And so what we put now into this formula in succession are the 12 separate answers that will occur if the month of C2 equals 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. So in a fiscal year that begins in October, if the month that we're getting out of here is a 1, a 2, or a 3, that's in the second quarter. So we put in a 2 here to count for when the month is January, and then a 2 for February and a 2 for March. And now the next 3 months, April, May, June, 3s. And then July, August, September, those are in the fourth quarter. And then October, November, December, they're in the first quarter. So in the example here that we're about to enter, and we'll have to format it, the month of C2 is going to be a 3. Therefore, what's the answer? Not the first one, not the second one, but the third one. The answer is going to be 2. So by pressing enter here, we'll complete this. Format is okay. We'll double click. And now we're looking at quarters based on a fiscal year that begins in October. So for example, that's in the first quarter, October, November, December. Second quarter, January, February, March, and so on. We see different examples here. They're all working properly. To adjust the fiscal year here, this is a little trickier too, although again, not that difficult really. The fiscal year is going to match up with the chronological year, except when we're in the fourth quarter. So we could approach this a couple different ways. We could say equal if, and refer to D2 here. If this equals, we're talking about a fiscal quarter that's a 1. In other words, if it's October, November, December. So if the fiscal quarter equals 1, comma, what do we want to do in this case? We want to take the year that's of that date and add 1 to it. So we're going to pick out the year of this particular date plus 1. But if it's not in that first quarter, we will simply use the year of this date. And recopy this. Of course, in the second entry, we're going to see, as you can imagine, 2012. Because this is in the first quarter of that fiscal year that begins in October, it's actually coming out, in this case, the year 2012. And by the way, a slightly tidier way, I guess you could say, would be simply to say, why don't we just take year, and then if D2 here equals 1, we'll simply put in a 1. Otherwise, nothing or 0. We're either going to add 1 to the actual year or we're going to add 0. And we only add 1 if the fiscal quarter happens to be 1, meaning it's those last 3 months of the calendar year. Re-enter that, recopy. and display this as an actual year. Now, as you can see with both calculations, whether it's for a quarter or a fiscal year, if the start of the fiscal year in your organization is different, you'll have to do some similar kinds of calculations, but it could be based on the same concepts that we saw here in columns D and E, calculating the appropriate fiscal quarter and fiscal year for different kinds of financial data.